just get streaming here. Hey, Thomas, how are you doing?
I'm great, thanks. How are you doing?
Good, good. So we have everybody telling us where they're calling in from. And, ooh, nice mug. I love the Type
Thanks.
Network mug.
Yeah, Type Network. Good folks.
Excellent.
And you've given me several mugs at various conferences. So there you go.
There's nothing like mugs, free stuff from conferences. So I want to ask you guys, since both Thomas and I do go to many type conferences, what is the last design or type conference you have attended? Just go ahead and type it in on the right-hand side, the chat bar right there. Let us know what the last design or type conference you attended was.
Do workshops count?
Sure, workshops are fine. Yeah, anything. There you go. Thomas will be the first.
Yeah, like here I'm typing. I guess I can just say, yeah, I taught a workshop in Seattle a couple months ago.
Oh, okay, great.
So that was my last.
Let's see. Carolyn's last was TypeCon. So Carolyn was at the TypeCon in Seattle. Jim's was either TypeCon or Adobe Max. I think TypeCon is after Adobe Max. And Kara, of course, all the AIGA stuff. TypeCon. Yay. Oh, Lisa, your last one was TypeCon 2015 in Denver.
Oh,
it's been a while.
I remember Denver. It was warm.
It was warm. It was good. It was warmer than expected. Actually, I thought Washington, D.C. was going to be terrible, but wasn't too bad.
We got lucky.
Yeah, we did. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. We have, we're getting started a little tiny bit late. We're going to have a compressed session today with Thomas Phinney. He is the CEO of FontLab, and welcome all to Typography Dojo. So I am Rachel Elnar, and I am the producer here at TypeEd in Los Angeles, and Thomas Phinney is calling all the way in from Portland. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Thomas, can you also tell us a little more background about you?
Oh, gosh. I've been doing font stuff for over 20 years now, and I spent over a decade at Adobe, last portion of that as their product manager for fonts and typography, and then 5 years with Jim, who's online with us at Extensis, where I had gotten this crazy idea that web fonts could be like a thing and that you could serve fonts via the web so that websites could use them. And this turned out, in fact, to be true, although our version of it did not become one of the super successful ones, but we were right there on the bleeding edge of it. And more recently, I left Extensis to join FontLab, where I've been for the last 3 years, and trying to get a new version of the sort of flagship font editor that has long been the industry standard.
And on the show, we talk about FontLab a lot. A lot of the type designers, Laura Worthington had talked about FontLab extensively. I know that Rod Cavazos mentioned FontLab, and also there's another type tool, or what was the other tool that you guys had?
Type tool is our sort of low-end intro app. Type tool is the same user interface as FontLab Studio 5, but it's priced at just under $50 instead of $600 and some. So it's very affordable and has 3/4 of the functionality. So it's a good place to start.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who are interested in the product after those talks. So it was very good. Hello, everybody. Glad that you could make it. We're going to get started in just a second. Just a couple housekeeping things. If you'd like to share out the event, use the share button underneath, or you could just copy and paste the URL above and let everyone know that we are getting started. And also, if you have any questions during the talk, feel free to use the questions and answers tab, again, underneath our video. Pretty much everything is around our video, so up, down, whatnot. Underneath our video is the questions and answers tab. Feel free to ask a question and also vote it up if there is a question up there that you would like to get answered. We are not going to have a ton of time. We're not going to go over an hour this time. So make sure to vote it up. This way we'll only answer the ones that are voted up. So, all right, we're going to get started here, Thomas. Thank you again for joining us. I'm really excited. I know this is a good talk. I saw you at Typo SF give
Oh,
this
yeah.
talk, and yeah, I really loved it. So I'm really looking forward to it. Hey, Marina. Hello, Anna. Thank you guys, everyone, for joining us. Eric and John from Ireland. It's great to see you guys. I am going to show your presentation screen.
Okay.
And Thomas, we're ready
We're
for
on?
you. Yeah.
Sweet. Okay, so you already know I'm Thomas Phinney. I was originally going to talk about, sorry, I have actually a whole ton of different cases. We're just going to focus on 2 of them today. So let me set the scene for you. The year was 1999. Me, I was like this, snot-nosed youngster. I was already pretty hardcore on this font stuff. I was working on the Adobe type team in the shiny new tower they just opened in downtown San Jose. Here you can see 3 towers, but originally there was just one. The original one had just gone up like a year before. The second tower was under construction. Adobe hadn't bought Macromedia and Flash. They hadn't even released Adobe InDesign, their so-called Quark killer application. But even back then, their type team was one of the most respected places for type design and font technology in the whole world. And I was pretty thrilled to be there, as I would be for another decade. Now, at this point, a guy named Louis Airy had been dead already for 10 years now. I didn't know anything about that. I had not yet discovered the thing that put his second wife and stepdaughter on the run from the law for over a decade, as far as I know, up to this very day. But I was about to learn. So Louis Airy had 5 kids from his first marriage, plus an unofficially adopted child and a stepdaughter from his second marriage. So 7 kids altogether. He died in September of '89. There was, oh, wait a minute. Sorry. There was no will. So that should mean his wife would get 1/3 and his kids, her stepchildren, 2/3. His second wife, Victoria, took everything. She tied up disposition of the estate by rotating lawyers. And this was going on in Prunedale, California. So she spent the money really quickly. New car, home renovations. The money was gone. There's nothing to dispose of. Gave the kids nothing at all. Kids didn't care that much about tiny fractions of the estate. Kid Victor told me all we wanted was some pictures and stuff. So what went wrong? Well, she couldn't hold off disposition of the estate forever. The value of the house had to be divided up. So finally, she did something. She produced a will. In 1996, she produced this will dated 1983, 7 years after her husband died. Louis' children contested the will. They hired a lawyer, a guy named Lester Shirley from Salinas, and called Adobe looking for a font guru. Got me. At this point, it was 1999, 10 years after Louis died. The heirs, who were kids when he died, were now adults, right? They'd grown up in the meantime. So this is the will the lawyer sent me a copy of. It looked awfully nice for 1983. So I figured I needed to see the original. Luckily, I was fairly close to the courthouse in Monterey, which, okay, this is kind of an older picture, but that's the place. And I went down to look at the original on file. I started to do what the lawyer had asked me to do, which was to look at the fonts to see what they were. You can see this yourself. It's some version of Times, right? And although there are various other unauthorized knockoffs, there are a couple main versions of Times. Linotypes Times Roman, Monotypes Times New Roman. Both of these are authorized versions of the typeface monotype created in the Times of London, which was new, hence Times New Roman, when it came out in 1932. So not so new anymore. And I was looking at this, and the red version there you're seeing overlaid is Monotype's version that's bundled with Windows 3.1, and ever since then. I actually came to the conclusion the font in the will was a much better match for Monotype's Times New Roman, see in red there, and with Linotype's Time Roman, which you see in blue. That's the version bundled with Mac and PostScript laser printers. But all that bundling of fonts was way later than '83. Computer printers back then didn't use these kinds of typesetting fonts, at least not without them being heavily adapted to work with the limitations of the devices of the day. But Times itself dates back to 1932, so that didn't seem like the easiest route to disprove the document being authentic, even if it was suspicious. But something else was catching my eye about this document. The printing. It looked really nice for 1983. There were no general purpose, high-res, scalable font printers available in 83. The IBM ThinkJet was 180 DPI inkjet, so like high-quality fax resolution, but it came out later than the Will. Same year, but later that year. The HP LaserJet, hey, 300 DPI, not until 84. 300 DPI inkjets, not till 87. So, and the HP DeskJet was the first of those. But all that stuff was later. So, yeah, it wasn't the ThinkJet, it wasn't the LaserJet, it was just too nice. And I was like, what can I do to figure this out? So I picked myself up one of these. So, anybody know what this is, by the way? Any takers on this? Oops.
I have no idea. There's nobody. You guys know? In the chat bar, please type it in if you know. Yes, Jim.
That is right.
Ooh, microscope.
And Jim's, I work on the software for that. Oh, that's right.
Oh, wow.
I've forgotten. So yeah, it is a USB microscope.
Cool.
I like to think of it as my detective's magnifying glass. And of course, I can't use this with any of my current equipment. I haven't been able to for ages because drivers. So anyhow, so let's
it's not
take
SCSI, though.
No, USB, yeah.
Good.
Yeah, and still I can physically connect it. I just can't do anything after that. So let's take a quick look at what some different kinds of printing look like when you take a close look. So that's what happens when you print on a printing press with offset litho and blow it up. Normal text size stuff. That's a 600 DPI laser printer. And you notice how it gets a little fuzzier and you get a few extra stray toner dots. This is what happens when you take that same previous thing and then photocopy it. So that's the laser printer, then photocopy. And you can tell, it might be hard to tell the difference between the laser printer and the offset litho after copying. This is what you get with high-res inkjet output. And you'll notice it's different. So I actually got to go to court and testify about this. And, I was thinking that I would get to, I get cross-examined and stuff, and all be very exciting. Didn't quite go down the way I expected. But, so what I did was I looked at this and I said, hey, if you look at this, you can see that when you print on inkjet, especially early inkjets, they've gotten better, by the way. You get, besides getting all these extra stray dots that get speckled all over, you also get some interesting things. Here, we have, at the top left of the O, we have essentially some bleed, wicking of the ink along the fiber of the paper. Because the ink is going on liquid. It dries awfully fast, but it's not quite instantaneous. Now down here, can you guys see my mouse pointer, by the way?
Yes, yeah, we can see.
Awesome, perfect, that's what I wanted to hear. So down here, you can actually see some streaking here as well. You can see little bits of streaking that are not wicking, because it's not continuous, right? But that's streaking of ink coming out of the print head. Again, very distinctive mark of an inkjet printer. But down here, on the serif at the end, more wicking. So this is like totally, this is a high-res inkjet, 300 DPI inkjet. I can even see, look at this, you can see the pixels if you enlarge it, right? This was before resolution enhancement techniques on the edges of letters. So you can actually see here, those are essentially the pixels, bing, bing, or the dots. Those are the dots of the letter. And I'm like, awesome, I can actually essentially physically determine the resolution. I'm not just guessing this is about 300 DPI. I can actually tell how many dots there are and see them, which is awesome. Now, they had all sorts of other evidence too. The language of the will turned out to clearly have been sourced from a do-it-yourself CD-ROM program that didn't exist until the mid-90s, not 1983. The signature was clearly forged, and the handwriting expert that they brought in even told the court who forged it. And I could rat hole on details in the language and stuff, but it was pretty slam dunk. So the short version is that the evil stepmother was the mastermind, Victoria Airy. Her friend Shannon Kelly wrote the will on her computer using this model will from this app, and also was a, quote, witness, unquote, for the signing. Victoria's daughter, Lori Gonzalez, her one daughter, all the other kids were not her kids originally, right? Forged the signature, helped write the will, and there were two other so-called witnesses who obviously did not see the guy sign it because he couldn't have been dead. So here's another question for y'all. What percentage of wills are contested, do y'all think?
What do you guys think? Go ahead and put it in the chat bar. What's the percentage of wills you think are contested? Sandy
75%,
says
70%, 15%, 5%, 25%, 1%. Well, Brenda Malone is closest, so the correct answer is about 2%.
Wow.
Anybody want to guess what percentage of will contests are successful, roughly?
Marina says half.
Half. Anybody else? 99% says Terry. 1% says June and Victoria. Okay, or Victoria, sorry. I'm just looking at the Victoria in the case. So the correct answer is, again, 2%. Now, if you take 2% of 2%, you get 0.04%, or 1 in 2,500. Now this, I just got this stat from the lawyer in the case. I'm believing him. Maybe it's changed over the years too. I know it's quite a while ago, but it's probably the right ballpark. Something like 1 in a couple of thousand are both contested and overturned. So not so many. So the will was found to be fraudulent in the will contest, and so the will was thrown out. There was then a civil case involving suing for damages. No jail time involved for that. It's just a lawsuit. But it was to get money from the offenders for the victims. And there were judgments of $10,000 against several of the defendants and $100K against Victoria Airy, the evil stepmom. By the way, I have nothing against stepmothers in general. I have had now I have had 2 stepmoms. My first stepmother passed away. They're both lovely women, fabulous people. Stepmothers are great, just not this particular stepmother. Okay, so $100K against Victoria Airy applied against her share of the estate, which, by the way, conveniently wiped out what she would have gotten had she not been evil witch. Then the state decided to pursue criminal charges, which means that the bad guys could get fined or jailed. That doesn't get restitution for the victims, but it does punish the guilty. So where are they now? The oldest son, I think, is Victor Airy, lived in the house until it was sold and disposition of the estate. Last time I checked, he and most of the other kids still lived in that area. The lawyer I was working with retired a few years later. Last I saw, he was still kicking around in Hawaii on the Big Island. House was sold, the estate closed a couple years later. Kids got all the money, less legal fees and stuff. But Victoria Airy and her daughter Lori fled prosecution, is the technical term. Or, as they say, they are on the lam. Last time I checked, they were still technically fugitives from justice with warrants out for their arrest. Now, in fact, as far as I know, that doesn't really mean a lot, right? Like, it's not like there's detectives chasing them down. But it does mean that, if they get pulled over for a traffic violation or something, if somebody gets pulled over for speeding, they're going to run their license and find this. And they're just like, uh-oh, off you go. So that was the first of what somehow became many cases I got involved in. One thing leads to another. You start doing something that nobody else is doing, and people start talking about it. And then, I talked about it at a conference or two, and that helped to snowball it. There are plenty of people who know lots about forged documents in general. It seems like I am the only sort of font forensics person. Now, today we're only talking about a couple of cases, and somehow I managed to scramble this, so maybe we'll still get to a third case in here. But we're going to talk about the respected rabbi. So this was still when I was at Adobe. It was also one of my earlier cases. A lot of my later cases, by the way, involved really exciting things like disputes over whether a document is the legally required point size or not, and therefore some otherwise binding contract isn't binding because the font wasn't big enough.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So they're maybe less exciting. But anyhow, so that's why I don't talk about those so much publicly, but there's a lot of money in those cases, actually. So here's the scene. Still working at Adobe, San Jose, early 2003. A year later, I'd moved to Seattle, starting my long time in the Northwest here. Neponset, New York, south of Jamaica Bay. I mostly know Jamaica Bay because A, it's next to the airport, JFK Airport, and B, it's where in the comic books in X-Men, Phoenix's shuttle crashes in Jamaica Bay, and that's when she turns into Phoenix. So that's why I know about Jamaica Bay. Maybe you guys have some other connection. I don't know. So Neponset, New York, October 2001, the old rabbi retires. He's replaced by Melvin May at the West End Sinai Temple congregation. So the new guy, very high-powered, high-profile style, great social skills, hot, up-and-coming rabbi. You can probably tell, I know this is a horribly fuzzy picture, but you can probably guess who the high-powered, slick guy is in this picture somehow. I don't know. Is it just me, or does it, you just immediately think, yeah, it's got to be the guy on the right, which is correct.
Right.
So, yeah, he got to give a blessing to open the U.S. House of Representatives in September of 2002, where, appropriately enough, he was introduced by Anthony Weiner, also of Scandal fame.
Right.
Everything was great. Everybody loved this guy. But one or two congregation members started to notice some oddities. He just didn't seem to know as much about theology as you might expect from a rabbi. I know not everybody is deeply religious, but this does matter. I know he's not a surgeon or an airline pilot or something, and it's not like if there was something wrong, people would die, but he is someone that people confide in and trust for religious judgment and wisdom. I think it would feel a lot like if you went to a psychologist for therapy and later found out their credentials were totally fake. You know? Mm-hmm. For the members of his congregation, that could be a deeply personal violation of trust. So this started some suspicion about his credentials. And there's a funny thing here. So young lady whose parents were on the search committee had been researching provenance and history of art for the Brooklyn Museum. They were doing an art from Auschwitz show, like art produced by concentration camp prisoners in Auschwitz. And for the opening of this show, they were using a list of local rabbis from the National Registry of Rabbis. And this guy, Melvin May, was not on the list. And Jessica wondered why. And she was like, oh, they were going to invite a bunch of local people. Why isn't my rabbi on the list of rabbis at all? I know he's new here, but he should be on the registry, right? So she went and asked her mom for his resume because her mom, both her parents actually, were on the hiring committee. And so she checked out the provenance of the rabbi much like she would a piece of art. And none of his resume history checked out. Alumni association from his first school had no record of him. And people from his former temples refused to talk about him, which was kind of odd. So she wrote a report and gave it to her parents and took it to the rest of the board at the temple. And so this started a whole thing, right? So they start asking about his rabbinical ordination, is the closest analogy from my world. Sorry, certificate, something called a smicha, and after a couple of days, the rabbi shows up late at night at these people's house, at the client's house, in his pajamas, waving his smicha. Here's the proof you were asking for. So he puts it down, he slams it down on the kitchen table, storms out. For days, it's like the elephant in the room. It sits on their table. Nobody wants to talk about it. Finally, Jessica, the daughter, starts looking into it. The school, mentioned on the smicha, closed a couple years later. Their records were held at another school after that, but were destroyed in a fire. So no way to check. There's some fallout at the temple, but finally, the mom is trying to get to the bottom of this and approaches the Type Directors Club in early '03. And the director of the Type Directors Club refers her to me. So that's how I got involved. And here, I apologize for the weird light blue thing. It's just some sort of weird scanning artifact. I should go back and try to clean this up. But that is in the scan I was using at the time. Now, the clients were still suspicious, and there was another reason if they didn't have enough already. The rabbi didn't give them an original document, nor did he give them a photocopy. No, he gave them a fax. He said that his ex-wife had ended up with a bunch of his papers and things when they'd separated, including the original of the smicha. She had faxed him a copy when this issue came up. And the funny thing, it's a fax and it's pretty low res, so there's not a lot you can tell. But who notices what's really odd about this? At least what I think is odd about this certificate.
No fax information, Brenda says.
Yeah, okay, there's that too. I think that may just be from a trimming of the scan, though. Monotype Corsiva. Well, there's that too. Melvin's name. Yeah. What's interesting about this is that this rabbinical certificate, most of this is like hand calligraphy. Like the letters are clearly not the same every time they show up. And it's clearly been calligraphy done by hand. And they're signatures. But the guy's name is clearly looks like it was set, typeset. Like with a computer. Yeah, like it could be indeed something like monotype Corsiva. So I'm looking at this and I immediately go, bing, bing, bing. Yeah, there's a number of fonts that look kind of like this-ish. And I come up with the top three that spring to mind, which are Soft Chancery, Lucida Calligraphy, and indeed monotype Corsiva, the sort of Soft Chancery equivalent that Microsoft has. And yes, indeed, Marina Gonzalez, you are the winner. You're the first to identify that font. It is totally monotype Corsiva. And there's a lot of, quirky little things about monotype Corsiva, like the little tweak thing here at the bottom right of the N. And the particular style of the swashes and stuff, this particular style of Y. Anyway, it just all matches very neatly. So does anyone know the origins of monotype Corsiva? I may have sort of referenced it passing there.
Marina? Mm-hmm. Maybe she knows.
Mm-hmm. So Monotype was asked by Microsoft to provide a set of functional equivalents of Adobe's core PostScript fonts. And this was in the beginning of the 90s. And I'll just point out, beginning of the 90s is not 1968. So yeah, it did not exist for another 20-some years. Now, of course, let me just say, there are other possible explanations. He said he got the facts from his wife. Maybe his wife was so clever and devious that she whited out his name and then printed it on a computer and pasted that in on top of his name on the certificate and faxed him that, thinking that somebody would notice. But he would. Okay, if that's a possible explanation, right? You can imagine if conceivable explanation that someone did something, right? They might not seem the most plausible explanations given the other oddities about the case, including like the fact that there was no way to verify that this particular school that he'd gone there, stuff. So he threatened legal action. The Temple Board resisted the accusations for several years. Nothing much happened for a couple of years. The board just didn't want to hear it. Basically it's like, how dare you accuse our rabbi kind of reaction, which is understandable if you believe in, but then there's this circular issue. But gradually people changed their minds. Board members resigned. The Kleins who'd come up with this issue in the first place actually left the temple. But then in September of 2005, about 3 years after he started, May was replaced. So he's no longer a rabbi at the West End Sinai Temple congregation. Now, being a rabbi in a small center like the Rockaways is usually a career-length appointment until you retire. So that is unusual. Where are these people now? So Jessica works on, last I checked, Jessica was working on cool educational stuff for kids at Mozilla, living in Brooklyn. Her mom, Rose, is still retired, lives in Bell Harbor, New York, not involved in the board of the temple. Rabbi still acts as a rabbi, occasionally performing weddings and such. He even works as a chaplain at a local hospital last time I looked. Rose is retired. Now, besides that, he's 76 years old. That was, my dates are old. He's now like 79. He was 76 years old when I last checked this a couple of years ago, living in Rockaway Park, New York. And he's also single, last I saw. So if you're interested in dating a dashing older man with fabulous people skills, on his profile it says he has a PhD. Oh, but he was 10 years younger than we thought. Huh. Oh, well, that could be, right? Maybe he just got his age wrong. And, PhD could be, who knows? I guess all those online people info sources that I used have it all wrong when they say he's 10 years older than that. My favorite bit, though, is his personal essay when he says who he's looking for. He wants to meet a woman who has similar values to him: honesty, truthfulness, sincere. I think that's awesome. That's what I would be looking forward to if I were you. So that was was one of my more interesting cases. Let's see what time we have.
We're 2:34, so.
Yeah. If you want to give me just a sec,
okay.
I think we have time for, we can either spend 15 minutes on Q&A, or I can pull in one more case.
What do you guys want to do? Yeah, let's see what you guys want to do. It's up to you. So you have one question, which you've already sort of answered. More stories. Everyone's asking for more stories. Oh my gosh. It's overwhelmingly.
Yeah. Okay. So give me just a sec here.
Okay.
You're not projecting my stuff anywhere. Yeah. Okay.
No, but I can close it.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. So just give me a sec.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Yeah, we got one more case.
Okay, give me just a second here. I didn't realize, this often happens with some of this stuff where I just end up whipping through it a little more quickly when I'm doing it for real.
All good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Erica, for the uppercase. No, that's very interesting. I mean, I'll wait till you have those up. I actually have a couple questions, but I'll wait till you get those up.
Yeah, no, I promised a different case, and somehow one second.
No problem.
Nope,
John.
no, I don't want that.
John says, I still have that inkjet O in my brain. Could that be nice art? It could be.
Yeah.
I didn't realize there's so much difference between the inkjet and the laser.
Yeah, no, I didn't either until I looked at it on a microscope.
Thank God for that Intel microscope.
Yeah, it was really cool, and it made it. I mean, I could see this stuff with my naked eye, but I could not. I could not. Here we go. Sorry.
It's okay. Sorry, we're putting you on the spot here.
I could see it with the naked eye, but it was much easier to. I did a much better job of showing people with the.
Sure. This is close up, right? Brenda says laser printers were very expensive in 1984. I bought the HP LaserJet 600 DPI that cost $5,000.
Yeah, no, I remember spending like $800 or something on.
Everything was so expensive back then. I think the Apple Writer was that.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah,
cost.
Sorry, it was $800 or something on the on my inkjet printer, and that was just a simple black and white, inkjet, one-sided, but it did 300 DPI, which kind of was a big deal. Okay, so let's get back on the case.
Sounds good.
So, case of the special sack. This is the other one I had promised. So, John Albert Thompson was an American frontier legend. There's a statue of him. There's a plaque. I even, shortly after this case, went to the dentist, and there was a children's book in my dentist's office about this guy. So, what was so interesting about it? So, he was an unpaid volunteer mailman, and he delivered mail for the post office for 20 years, from 1856 to 1876. Between Placerville, California, and a couple of towns near Carson City, Nevada. So this is the modern route between these two cities. And, it's only a 100 miles-ish. So, not so far. Now, do you notice anything about this route? It goes by Lake Tahoe. It's very scenic. So why is it all green? On Google Maps here, that green stuff would be the northern Sierra Nevada mountains and National Park today. So these mountains, winter in the Sierra Nevada mountains kind of rivals Death Valley summers for title of most brutal environment in California. You can get 100-mile-an-hour winds in the mountain passes, 10 feet or more of snow. Almost nobody is crazy enough to try to cross this range in winter. It was very rare. In fact, just 10 years before Thompson started doing it every year, a large expedition tried to cross these mountains in winter. Anybody remember the name of that expedition?
Guys?
They might have been right there.
There we go.
The Donner Party. Anybody remember what happened to the Donner Party? Yep, cannibalism. 90 people, only half of them lived, and only because they ate the half that didn't. Now, Thompson was not just a random immigrant. He was a pretty tough guy, and he was used to the winter. He'd grown up in Norway, in a town in Telemark County. Does that name ring any bells for anyone? Telemark? Skiing, yes. So he brought with him knowledge of this technology that had never been seen in California before. Nobody even knew what these things were. To this day, he's known as Snowshoe Thompson, because that's what people called his skis. He crossed the mountains repeatedly every winter for 20 years and didn't even get paid for it. And he continued right up to the year he died, 1867. And he was missed the following winter, but the year after that, the Transcontinental Railroad was put through right at Donner Pass, which, by the way, was its single most difficult section to build. So what does this have to do with me? So the year was 2005, as best as I can recall, and I got an email from the producer of the PBS TV show, History Detectives. And they had a question. They wanted to know, was this his mailbag? As far as I know, the mailbag was not cut in half on the left side there. It's just an artifact in the photo they sent me. This is the photo they sent. What can I say? 15 years ago, digital imaging and photos were clunkier than they are now. And this is there were 3 photos. They wanted me to look at this label. It appeared to have been made with a typewriter. Could I tell if it was old enough to be authentic from the mid-1800s? Man, I started doing a bunch of research. I started learning more about the earliest typewriters and looking at this and stuff. And it was very challenging because there were a lot of different early typewriters. It seemed like it was probably just too early for it to have been very likely. And, and then I started asking them some questions and thinking about this. So you, Madam Producer, told me that this was in a museum, or supposedly had been in a museum for a while, that was the Wells Fargo Museum from their sort of Pony Express kinds of days, and so on. And they're like, yeah. And I was like, okay, so let's talk about this some more. If it was in a museum, and then when you got it later, it had a label on it, why does it matter if the label is as old as the bag? Because couldn't it have just been put on in the museum, and that wouldn't, the label being as old as the bag doesn't tell you anything? And as long as it's, as old as when it was in the museum, which I gather was until just a few years ago. And they're like, oh, good point. Thank you. Bye for now. So months and months later, maybe it was a year later, I actually saw the particular episode on the History Channel, on PBS, not History Channel, my bad. On PBS, I actually happened to catch that episode, which is funny because I didn't watch a ton of TV. And it was cool, and they decided it was almost certainly authentic. Everything else checked out. They didn't mention the trying to date the label. And that just goes to show you that cases don't always work out with some dramatic conclusion like in TV and the movies, and that there are red herrings and things that just peter out, or the supposed clue could just be irrelevant. But I thought it was a pretty interesting case nonetheless, and I kind of wished that this mailbag was, important in some way. That this label was important in some way. The mailbag certainly was cool, and the guy was amazing, and I wish that I could have told them something more useful than, why do you think this label even matters? So that is it for me. I think we still have a few minutes for questions.
Yeah, we do have a couple questions. Great. Thank you, Thomas, for bringing up the last case. So I'll just go through the questions one by one.
I got it up here as well.
I know. I think you've already answered Cecilia's, but I'm going to ask you again. Does your business card say Font Detective, or do you have a less fun, more formal title?
I do indeed. So I'm CEO at FontLab, and I was just saying I think I ought to design a Font Detective business card, though. It would be a fine thing to have. And these days, of course, thanks to print on demand and so on, you can get short-run business cards very inexpensively.
That would be great. Excellent. All right, so I'll just keep going through these. Marina asks, so did you have anything to do with the font matching feature in Photoshop?
Nope. Long after I was gone. Font matching stuff came in relatively recently, and I left Adobe end of 2008. So it's been a while.
All right. Lorraine asks you, have you always had this blended knack for logic and creativity? Does it show up elsewhere?
I guess so. I would say yes. And it's one of the few things I do that's unique. I mean, honestly, most of the font stuff I do, there's somebody else who does that exact particular thing better. I probably do more different fonty things than almost anybody, but any given thing, I can tell you exactly who is better at that than I am. And there's a few particular examples, like John Hudson does 2/3 of what I do, and that 2/3 he does it all better, no question. Which would be depressing if not for the fact that one of my Font Detective things involved something that John missed. So
what is that?
Oh, this is a copy of Machiavelli's The Prince. Longest copy. Dated from 1927. And it's this lovely thing.
Wow.
And big as heck. And what's interesting about it, besides the fact that it's got some very fancy printing.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. It was dedicated to Mussolini and stuff. And for various reasons, I suspect that Mussolini was probably the original owner of it. Because the one thing I figured out about this that John missed, and I'll lord this over him forever because, I'm that kind of rude person, and it's nice to have one thing that I figured out that John didn't. So this was the first copy of this book. John knew it was one of 11 printed in a super limited edition. And he owned that for a while, and he put it up for auction to benefit ATypI, the International Typography Association. And I was looking at it, I was like, wait a minute. And realized that it appeared to be copy number 1.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's kind of cool.
That's really cool.
And given that it was dedicated to Mussolini and printed by the state printing house, the Italian state printing house, while Mussolini was in power, and so on and so forth, and given that Mussolini was a huge Machiavelli fan, he wrote an essay about the virtues of Machiavelli that got published in the London Times, oddly, obviously before the war, and so on. And so I'm like, gosh, you've got to think that maybe they gave copy number 1 to Duce himself. I cannot prove this theory, but it seems plausible.
You need to have some fingerprint technology to help you with that, perhaps.
Ooh. That's interesting. I didn't think of that. Do fingerprints last for a century or 90 years?
I don't know. I'll have to find a fingerprint detective.
Yeah. Good questions.
Well, yes, thank you. We'll do one more question, and then Thomas, I know we need to go, so we won't stay too long. So
Happy to.
Thomas Dant asks, how do you feel about the resurgence of hand lettering? Will this make it harder or easier to be a font detective?
And lettering is cool. I know people who are calligraphers, and I kind of suck at calligraphy, so I have a lot of respect for good quality hand lettering. I think it's awesome, and but at the same time, people keep on using computers for a lot of stuff, and I think there will be, most formal documents are still going to be produced on computer and printed out and signed, and there will be backdated documents, I'm sure,
right,
for a long time to come.
Right.
But yeah, I like hand lettering. It's cool.
Except Melvin May, who did not hand letter his name.
Yeah. Well, had he done so, I could have gotten him off the hook there. But I think his calligraphy probably wasn't good enough, and it wasn't like he was going to tell other people or get someone in with him.
Wow, what an answer! What a solution to that. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you again, Thomas, for spending an hour with us and sharing with us your cases. I find it very interesting what you do.
Thanks.
And very, very unique, especially in the type world. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. We will continue the conversation. If there's any more questions, we'll post them in the Facebook group. Cool. And hopefully you can answer them as well if you guys think of any other questions, but definitely what the font. Oh yeah, so Brenda's asking really quickly, what are you a member of the What the Font forum?
Nope. There are, for just straight font identification, there are a number of people who are hotter at it than I am. I'm good at doing the identification and explaining to the lawyers and the judge exactly how you know that is the correct identification. So that's an extra kind of geeky aspect of that.
There's so many fonts out there, I don't even know where you start.
Oh gosh, yeah. No, it can be challenging on occasion.
Exactly. Okay, so we will continue the conversation on Facebook. Thank you again, Thomas, and have a great day. Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye.